everyone. Welcome back to the Earth Dawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters with your questers Josh and Dan. I am Dan.
I am Josh.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things Parlainthical, as we're going to talk about, we're going to break down one of the first adventures in the Parlainth Adventures book, Blood Pact.
Yes, this is being recorded just a couple of days after our live show at FredoniaCon. We are both a little bit punchy, so we're going to do a couple of quick episodes. We were originally maybe looking at doing both of these in one episode, but we decided that we would give ourselves a kind of easy night and do 2 short episodes, each covering one.
Yeah.
Which I think for like archive and tracking down purposes may actually end up being easier for people because.
And the YouTube playlists also help out, so.
Yeah, maybe.
This'll
But before we get into that, we're going to talk about a thing that we were talking about in the live show.
Yes. So I figured out we were asked somebody brought up, maybe it was me, I don't know, somebody else brought up,
there was a question that came in about resources in Haven.
Right, Matthew.
Where food and water came from.
Matthew, yes. So yes. I remembered that there was a well in Parlainth. I figured out where that idea came from. It's a two-part thing. First off, I looked at the map, and as you walk into Haven from the lower right-hand corner of the map, southeast, my directions are good, and they may not be, you walk in the path a little bit, and there's this round structure, and it looks like a brick wall, which usually indicates a well. And when I ran this adventure, before the 4th edition book was ever published, there were only 5 things listed there, and they were all like taverns and Torgax and Vartigal's lore exchange and so forth and so on. So this thing wasn't labeled. So I looked at it and said, that looks like a well to me, number one. So that's where I kind of came up with that idea. I needed it to be a well because I ran Blood Pact first, but my party was not in Parlainth. I needed to get them there. And so what Blood Pact does is I needed to taint the well water with the horror. And so somebody traveled out of Haven with tainted well water. They were touched. They encountered my party. They tracked it back. So I had to modify the adventure from my own personal needs. It worked really well. Nobody questioned it. It was fine. That's where I had the idea for the well. 2-part.
That makes sense, and I can understand that, and that's fine. The
4th edition
map,
update?
Yeah, the original map of Haven in the Parlainth box set does not label that thing. It seems, if you look at the relative scale, that it is awfully big for a well.
Yeah.
If you look at it compared to like other structures and stuff.
It's the only well in town. I figured it had to be huge.
Fine. Like, again, whatever modifications you chose to make and however you made the place your own is fine. It's just that the 4th edition update for Legends of Barsave labeled that structure and made it Trident Keep. Hence
Fair.
The sort of confusion that everyone was having because they're like, well, on the map it's already labeled as the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Earth Dawn. No. I figure we can have a tower structure above a well. We're magical enough we can figure out how that structure works. That'd actually be a cool looking picture.
Long story short, Dan was remembering something that he came up with on his own, which is perfectly fine. Yep. And it does not appear that there is any discussion about where the community mainly gets its water from.
Fair. No argument here on that. No argument at all. Anyway, so that's where that whole thing came from. Matthew, I hope that answers your question. If anyone wants to modify it the way I did, knock yourself out, because I didn't do anything all that special. Anyway, I still think a tower above a well would be a really cool picture to see.
I don't know.
No. I'm not the artist that can draw that out. Anyway, so the first adventure listed in the Parlainth Adventures is called Blood Pact, written by Tiuwin, which I don't know if that's got to be somebody's moniker, nom de plume, something like that.
I think the individual's first full name is Tiuwin Woodruff. Wow. For some reason, the last name, and it may be that they were not going by that at the time that this was published.
Fair.
But I recognized the name because they worked on other Earth Dawn stuff as well.
Cool.
And I seem to recall Woodruff being the last name that is usually associated with that.
That makes sense. So this is also written for 6 to 8 players of second to third circle. So some experience necessary when you're going into Haven and or Parlainth, because this one takes place mostly in Haven. I think all 4 of them take place mostly in Haven, but you dabble a little bit here and there into Parlainth. And these are, of course, all small adventures so that you can dip your wick, get your foot wet, whatever the case may be, and then eventually perhaps expand upon this into a longer adventure into the depths of Parlainth yourself. So this one starts at the map wall in Haven. And I like that there's an overall theme to this. So if you are running this one as a game master, I can't say bombard them, but try and just remind people of the theme. And it basically is, there's a vulnerability of youth and the responsibility of the strong to protect the weak. I like that in here. Again, we're trying to build heroes in Earth Dawn.
Yes.
So it's very nice. So this basically has like 6 parts to it. Jasom, is that how you want to say it? Or is it Jasom? Jasom. So it's
Jasom.
Yeah, Jason. It's like Jason with an M instead. He's a 6-year-old kid. He touches Mindtrap's blood. This is where I tweaked it and he poisoned the well instead. So Mindtrap's blood got into the well instead. But this is actually painted on the map wall. So Sekra used his blood as paint to paint on the map wall. And Jason just kind of happens to touch it. He knew he shouldn't have, but he did anyway. He mistook it for paint and therefore collapses because he's 6 and doesn't really have any mental preparedness for fighting off the horror who's now infecting his mind. So his older sister, Jezra, only 2 years older, is trying to take care of him. And you need to play investigative reporter. This is where CSI Barsafe comes into play with evidence analysis a lot for the party that I ran this through. So Jezra, the older sister, saw Sekra leave the wall moments before her brother collapsed. So it's like a 1, 2, 3, these things happen. And if you do the right kind of questions, you can figure this whole thing out. And so you have to otherwise ask around the rest of those troll and track down Sekra within Haven.
Yes. So before we get into that, let's do a little bit of what has come before, because you just tossed around a lot of stuff without setting any kind of context. Now, obviously, player characters will not have the context when they come into this, but so that people understand what we're talking about.
Go for it.
There is a horror known as Mindtrap, and it has corrupted, co-opted, done something to a Tiskrang named Sekra, who has been given some of Mindtrap's blood, because when people come in contact with it, they are able to be influenced and their souls kind of pulled in, their minds pulled in and taken over by the horror.
Yeah.
Sekra manages to find a loophole in the instructions that he was given and uses the blood to paint on the map wall. And by coming into contact with the blood, this child sets out the discovery path of what is going on.
Yeah. So Mindtrap works kind of like a virus, because Sekra and their party were in Parlainth. The rest of the party didn't make it. And so Mindtrap decided to infect Sekra and then let them back loose to possibly spread more, just like a virus and a host. So just so everybody gets the generalized idea there. So after a while, and this now that you have the threads of what you're supposed to be looking for as a party, you can explore Haven to the nth degree to find Sekra. You can explore Haven to find where, if you want to, this is also kind of like a choose your own adventure. You can decide to take Jezra and Jason home if you want to, because Jezra may not be able to carry Jason on their own. So this is what my party did, is they actually escorted them all the way home. But then they had to find Sekra after that to question the Tiskrang as to what was going on. So there's a lot of investigation, a lot of ROLE playing your character and questioning and resolution of some minor plot threads there. So once you get to Audra's house, she's the mom, get them home and maybe get the kid to recuperate a little bit, talk to her a little bit, see what's going on. She's got a magic item, I believe. Was it her or Sakura had the magic item? I forget which one. It's been a long time. Anyway, we'll talk about the magic item later. But Sakura, this is the opportunity for the Game Master to play a little bit off kilter. So the Scrying is slightly going mad, and they is plotting to avenge her slain friends in Parlainth. Doesn't quite know how to go about it yet. Needs to find the right people. But during question and answer time, again, more investigation. This is going to be interesting answers on Sakura's part. So the Game Master gets to have a lot of fun playing a tweaked individual who is a little paranoid, a little vengeful, a little scared, a little just not
little broken.
in the right headspace. Yeah, very broken.
One of the things that can be a potential stumbling block when it comes to dealing with those who have been mentally broken by the horrors in some capacity is to try and evoke a certain amount of pathos and empathy without descending into parody or silliness.
Caricature. Yeah.
And being cognizant of existing tropes and stigmas and portrayals of mental illness within media in general.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, a lot of this may depend on the type of game you're running, the tone of game you're running. But I think when you are dealing with victims of the horrors, when you are dealing with Sakura in this particular adventure, it may be a little frustrating to talk to them. It may be a little bit difficult to deal with them because of their broken mental state. But there should be a sense of loss and sorrow and pathos, again, for lack of a better term, rather than, oh, here's the kooky kind of broken crazy person because they got a horror in their head.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the horror-scarred madman NPC that shows up in, I think it's in the Game Master's book of the Butterspider Box set, where like one of the quotes is, "Stop looking at my rock," which is
out of left field.
Kind of left field, kind of silly. And I think part of that is that it doesn't necessarily have any real context around it. You know, again, a lot of it depends on tone. A lot of it depends on the style of game that you're playing. But it's just something that I see a character like this, and as someone who is cognizant of tropes and representations and all sorts of stuff, is one of those things that makes me go, yeah, this is something that would perhaps should be dealt with, certainly from a writing / development standpoint, is something that I would want to approach with
care and caution.
Yeah, care and dignity, for lack, to perhaps choose a term, to recognize that despite their condition, despite their victimhood, they are still a person and deserving of the empathy that
they should warrant.
That we would want to be extended, perhaps, if we were in that same situation.
Absolutely. Sakura is a victim who is coping with A, the loss of all their friends, B, now the mental instability, and C, not sure what steps to take next. And so when, and it will be a when the party gets to question Sakura, there are some answers already in the book for you in the Parlainth Adventures. And so there's a guideline or some guidance as to what kind of tone to take, how scrambled the words should be, maybe an underlining meaning, so that the game master who's read the whole adventure will know what these lines mean that Sakura is going to say, and the party will not necessarily be able to, match point A to point B to point D to point H in Sakura's, troubled mind at the moment. So it is a troubled mind, but one that probably could be saved. So after all that, you can decide to help, you can decide not to help. Then there's the catch, which is within a day or two, the mom is now comatose because they got infected by Mindtrap as well, dealing with her son. So now you've got two reasons, and now if you choose not to help A, bad heroes. B, now you're leaving this little girl to tend to her ailing mom and her ailing brother. So it's a little railroady, but I understand this is how horrors also work. And so that's what you're here to do is this is the teaser, this is the hook. Everybody should take the bait at this point. If you didn't already take the bait, you've now doubled the circumstances.
Right.
So then really it all breaks down into getting into the twists and hunting the horror. That's it. It's a real simple premise. Very easy. This is, I think, where you could stretch out the adventure. Since it's meant to be a short one, it's only like 9, 10, 12 pages. Exploring Parlainth into the twists, this is where I think you could stretch it out if you wanted to. Broaden it a smidge. Not entirely sure how. You've run more of these than I have. But that's pretty much it. Unless there's any 4th edition updates to the stats you want to see or any changes you'd like to make to the major plot line.
Yeah. The horror's stats are reasonable, I think, taking a quick look at them from a 1st edition, 2nd and 3rd circle characters, which is what is sort of recommended for this. Mm-hmm. The defense ratings are in a decent place for that. Physical defense of 13, spell defense of 10, mystic, aka mystic defense of 10.
Yeah.
They're on the higher end, but this is a horror. This is a nasty thing. It is the only combat really in this entire adventure. It does have multiple attacks at an attack step of 10, so its attacks will be roughly equivalent to the defenses of the higher characters. Mm-hmm. It's got some spells as well. Its spell casting is 18, which is rough, which means its spells are likely to hit, and it's got Crushing Will, it's got Razor Orb, it's got Vines. It's got some nasty spells.
Yeah.
It's not that fast. Looking at like 1st edition step numbers, its full movement is only 50.
Yeah.
Combat move of 25, which in 1st edition is kind of on the slower end of things.
Fair.
It's got a dexterity step of 4, but all of its other attribute steps are double digits. It's got 12 armor and 7 mystic armor. Again, in 1st edition, the armor ratings tended to be a little bit higher because you had the armor defeating hits that would completely ignore that would go through. I think a group of 6 to 8 3rd circle characters would probably take some damage fighting this. This would be a tough fight, but I think it's eminently doable.
Yeah.
To deal with that. Again, the roughest part is the fact that it's got 4 attacks and 3 spells, if I'm remembering how the 1st edition stat blocks work, which means on its turn, it's going to be doing quite a lot of stuff, although it would still need to weave threads, so I think some of those spells do have threads or multiple threads, and it needs to use one of its spell casting actions in order to weave a thread.
Yeah, 4 attacks per turn, you're right. And 3 spells that it can cast. So, yeah. Oof.
I seem to recall that if the spells replaced its regular actions, that the spells would be in parentheses. Okay. I seem to recall that being the stat block thing. I'm not going to grab my 1st edition book to double check, but I think that's how it worked. But, yeah, it's got decent armor. It's got a high wound threshold, so wounds aren't likely to happen unless you get a really good damage roll. It's got a knockdown step of 28, so even if you actually do manage to cause a wound, it is not likely to be knocked down by it.
Yeah.
It's got 19 points of karma with a karma step of 16. So you could really ruin somebody's day with that if you wanted to. I always kind of viewed horror karma as something that you bring in if, for some reason, things seem to be going too easily for the group.
Yeah.
Rather than something that you just bring in willy-nilly. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of that will depend on the tone of game that you're running. You are dealing with Parlainth and the horrors. I wouldn't necessarily want to say that maybe you want to make an example of someone. But that would certainly be a way to do it, would be to have it make one of its physical attacks and dump karma into the attack test.
Yeah. What do you think about the Legend Point payout for Mindtrap? Only 4,700. A little low, a little high?
I don't know.
Fair.
I would need to compare it to other things to get a sense of whether that is fair or not. I'm presuming, perhaps, that the legend point total there is based on the legend point guidelines from the Creatures of Barsave book, but I have no idea whether that's actually the case or not.
That's fine. I just figured I would double check because we're going to talk about all the stats. We talk about all the stats just in case for a 4th edition update, if there would be one. But the interesting part is so dealing with Mindtrap, going through the twists. Like I said, the only other way I expanded this is my party was not in Parlainth. This is how I got them to Parlainth, and that extended the adventure as well because I got to do they got to do riverboat travel, so combat encounter or 2 on the way, pirates, whatever. So I extended it that way.
Yeah, and that's cool. And there's stuff that you could perhaps have as other things going on in the twists when they're delving towards Mindtrap's lair. If you want to change things up or have some other kind of encounters or environmental stuff going on there. My only quibble with the change that you made to it,
that's fine,
is that by making the corruptive thing being in the water supply, that feels to me, especially if the group isn't there to pick up on the problem, can cause a lot of difficulty. That's a lot more spreadable. And able to affect a lot of people compared to a little bit of blood on the wall that the kid accidentally touches.
Agreed.
With the discovery of that there. Again, as long as you're sort of thinking through the consequences of that, I think it's fine.
I knew that the elementalists in the party had purified water, and I was hoping they pulled off a really
right, but that doesn't help all of the people in Haven that would have potentially been using that water source before they get there.
I know. So I also laced in rumors of other people having the same problem in Comatose. So it was a wider spread problem. I had that in there.
The other thing is
they needed to find Mindtrap in a hurry.
Again, an issue with the, I'm using this to get them to Parlainth. Yes, there is a need for a certain amount of speed on this. And if the group is not there, that changes the severity and timeline of things a certain amount.
Agreed.
Again, if you are thinking through the consequences of that and how serious a problem this is, fantastic.
I'm pretty sure the me of a decade ago did.
Yeah, the other thing that I noticed is that in the first encounter where Jason touches the blood and succumbs to the horror's influence, it gives player characters a little bit of plot protection in that it mentions that if any of the player characters touch the blood on the wall, which is still active and can still affect people, they get kind of a flash and an impression of what it is like in there, but they are not subsumed by the horror because otherwise they're out of the adventure for the rest of it.
Yeah.
It says, make a spellcasting test, and if it's successful, this happens. I wouldn't even necessarily make the test. I would just have that be the result and hand wave it's a young kid, you managed to resist it.
Yeah.
But the kid did not because it's a kid.
Exactly.
Maybe, again, depending on the way you're playing your game, maybe roll the dice behind your screen, but kind of disregard the result. I know that there are various schools of thought on that. Why roll the dice if you already know what the result's going to be?
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, again, a nice, short, probably one evening's worth of gaming.
Yeah.
A little bit of investigation, a little bit of role-playing and interaction, and then a tough fight against a singular opponent that, granted, has multiple actions, so the action economy isn't completely out of whack in it.
Yeah.
And appearance... Now, I don't remember, actually. Hold on.
You talking the magic item?
Butterspider Box. Yeah, the Butterspider Box.
There's a treasure card for it, and then this is I think the first appearance of it in an actual adventure.
No, well, the Butterspider Box actually does appear in the Parlainth box set.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the adventure. That was the treasure card I was thinking of.
Right. Yeah. So it shows up there, and then it appears in this adventure, just as a thing that Jason's mom, Audra, happens to have this and can offer it as a reward for what they got, which is a pretty sweet reward.
No kidding.
All things considered.
This is a badass treasure. One of my players did walk away with this at the end because they rescued everybody. Everybody's fine. And Audra gave it to them because she didn't entirely know exactly how it worked, but They were like, we'll take this. The interesting thing, because there's a butter carving contest every year, you can go on the internet and find a spider carved out of butter picture to actually hand to people instead of the art that's included. Not that the artist didn't do a good job, but I like finding real pictures of spiders carved out of butter.
The Butterspider Box is a really sweet recovery item.
Oh, yeah.
Really sweet.
Oh, yeah. That's nothing to sneeze at. Update that for 4th edition?
We did. There's an update to the Butterspider Box in the Haven Volume 1, the Legends of Barsave Collection Haven Volume 1.
Nice. Does it still have 7 ranks? Because this sucker took up an entire page. It was awesome.
Yeah, so the one difference that I notice is that the original version of the Butterspider Box gives a free recovery test. The version in the compendium, when they get touched with it, they make a recovery test, but it doesn't spend one. So they are still getting a free one. It just doesn't give them one that they can hold on to power, say, Fire Blood or some other recovery test powered ability.
Yeah. It just, hey, congratulations, roll your dice and heal up.
But then the bonuses...
The effects?
It provides a pretty nice bonus as you get things higher up in recovery test. It also doesn't have the blatant restore somebody from the dead ability in the revision.
Rank 7?
Yeah. It does allow the regeneration of limbs or the recovery from like withered limb effects.
Mm-hmm.
It's a neat little kind of weird item.
Yeah. I appreciate it because it was vastly different than just sword, shield, spell book, spell staff, whatever. So it's completely, left turn into the magical treasure type things. So I liked that. What I would do so you said the plot armor that if it was an adventurer, one of the player characters touched the blood and so forth, I would just make it tougher every single day to resist the effects of Mindtrap. And so, once or twice a day, sun up, sundown, roll your spell casting or your whatever, and just try and resist it. And so 3 or 4 days in, you're starting to go a little bit batty.
Yeah, I don't feel that the time frame of the adventure as presented really makes that worthwhile.
Fair.
Unless you extend the amount of time for them to reach Mindtrap's lair, but it's made fairly clear that Mindtrap has gotten kind of as close to Haven as it can.
Yeah.
So that it's not clear on the other side of the city. Yeah. It's on the twists side of things. I suspect, because it mentions that the boy touches the blood in the morning.
Yep.
And so I suspect that all of this takes place in the span of a day.
Agreed.
That's my guess.
Yeah, you're going against a ticking clock to take care of the kid, his mom, probably anybody else, just in case if you ran it my way.
Right, but that's, again, just pointing out the narrative difficulty of every day the test gets more difficult.
Fair.
The adventure might not last long enough for that to be worthwhile.
Fair.
What you might be able to do is perhaps, and I don't know that it's mentioned specifically, it does have the horror mark power.
Yeah.
Which could potentially allow you to do things like communication and whatnot to make it clear. Maybe give the impression that if the horror mark from touching the blood is successful, then the horror has the option of drawing you in, and it may not want to.
Yeah.
And it may make that explicit. Fair. As you are now connected to me, and I could do to you what I did to that child, or then when they're meeting with Sekra, look what has become of this one who tried to resist me.
Yes.
Kind of getting that monologuing villain, that I think might be the best way to handle that, rather than just have it be anyone who touches the blood gets sucked into this thing.
Yeah.
Anyone who touches the blood gets marked, and the mark allows the horror to use Soul Trap at a distance.
Yeah. No. I ran this 10, 15 years ago, so by all means, give me newer ideas and give somebody else other options.
I don't know that I ever actually ran this one. If I did, it was only once, and I don't recall any specifics.
Fair. I still have my highlighted notes in the book. So I've marked my book up completely and I've crib notes here and there. So yeah, I remember this one. I remember all 4 of the ones I ran in Parlainth because it was like the last time I strung all of these together. Later, I'll tell you which order they came in. This one was first because, like I said, I had to get people to Parlainth. So I appreciate your updates to what I ran and your ideas that other people can use as well. Because we're doing not just here's how the adventure should work, but here's how it could also work if you want to do these things and tweak it this way and that way. So we've bent this like origami and we'll unfold it on this podcast. Any other thoughts on this one?
None
Fair.
others on this. Again, a nice little short, flavorful, horror-centric adventure that has a good amount of investigation and role-playing, and then one really tough fight.
Agreed. And that's all you need. So this is your introduction to Parlainth. This is not a bad one.
Yeah.
I like it pretty well. So until next time, folks, go find the Butterspider Box for your legend.
Good night, everybody.